I built a life on warmth and Christmas spirit. But for 10 years, every Christmas morning, my wife gave me 3 hours of cold, empty space. She said it was for errands. I said it was trust. But one winter, I refused to wait by the window, and I followed the faint red glow of her taillights. What I found was a truth colder than the deepest snow, waiting for me in a forgotten place. A truth that proved I was married to a ghost. Hello, and welcome back to Chroma Chronicles. We usually focus on stories of reckoning and revenge, but today, we dive into a story of silent, persistent betrayal, the kind that freezes your heart instead of burning it. It's a tragedy built on a foundation of love and a forgotten promise. Before we begin this chilling story, if you believe that the truth, no matter how painful, must always come to light, please hit that subscribe button. Your support keeps our community alive and ensures these difficult revelations reach those who need to hear them. My name is George. I'm 52 years old now, and I've been living in this quiet New England town for most of my life. The events I'm about to describe took place over 10 years, starting the moment my wife, Clara, and I moved into our home, a charming, colonial-style house that looked like it belonged on a Christmas card. Clara was everything I thought I wanted. Kind, gentle, and utterly devoted to making our house a home. Our life together was simple, predictable, and profoundly comfortable. We had established so many traditions, especially around the holidays. The smell of cinnamon and roasting coffee was the official scent of our relationship. But every single Christmas morning, without fail, the script would change. It was always the same routine. She would wake up early, hum softly in the kitchen as she made breakfast, and smile like everything in the world was perfect. She would hand me a cup of hot coffee, kiss my cheek, and announce that she had some errands to run before lunch. The excuse always varied slightly: gifts to pick up, a special forgotten item for dinner, or a quick visit to a friend. I never questioned it. For the first few years, I genuinely thought it was part of her tradition, maybe a special surprise she was orchestrating for us or a secret act of kindness for someone in need. She always left wearing the same gray coat, the one with the slightly loose button near the collar. Her scarf was a bold red, her gloves black, and she always carried the same, small, worn leather bag. She never rushed, she never looked nervous, and she never missed that 3-hour window. 3 hours later, she'd return. Her hands would be cold, her cheeks pale, and her eyes slightly red, as if from the cold wind or something else. She would brush off her absence, saying the lines at the stores were long, or the unexpected weather delayed her. For 10 straight years, I believed every word she said. I chose to believe her because believing was easier than confronting the massive, unspoken silence that she carried home with her. Each time she returned, she looked subtly different, quieter, heavier somehow. She would sit by the fireplace and stare into the flames, lost in thoughts she never shared. She would immediately change the subject if I tried to ask about her morning, quickly turning her attention to dinner or wrapping gifts, pretending nothing out of the ordinary had occurred. Love, I realized later, makes you blind. It makes you interpret patterns as coincidences, lies as acts of kindness, and massive emotional absence as a harmless mystery. I spent 10 Christmases waiting by the window, watching the snow pile up on the driveway, hoping to see her headlights appear, and praying that the silence she carried home wouldn't ruin the day. But deep down, the feeling began to solidify. The patterns no longer felt harmless. The mystery was turning into a lie. My trust had slowly, painfully turned into suspicion. I knew the next Christmas morning would not end the same way. Last December, the snow came early, and it came hard. Thick, heavy flakes covered the street before sunrise, wrapping the world in a silent, white blanket. I woke up before her that morning, feeling a knot of dread tighten in my stomach. When she finally woke up, everything unfolded exactly the same way. The smile, the breakfast, the familiar gray coat, and the red scarf. The practiced words, "I have some errands to run, darling." She kissed my cheek, picked up her bag, and walked toward the front door. But this time, I didn't stay seated by the window. Something inside me refused to be ignored. I watched her step into the snow. My heart wasn't pounding from anger, but from fear, the cold fear of knowing something you love is about to shatter. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my truck keys. My hand shook as I locked the door behind me, feeling the weight of 10 years of unanswered questions. The world outside was still quiet, the snow muffling every sound. Her taillights glowed faintly in the distance, 2 tiny red dots cutting through the white fog of dawn. I started the engine and followed, keeping a safe distance. I turned off the radio. I didn't want to hear the fake joy of Christmas music. I wanted silence, only the sound of my own breathing and the crunch of my tires on the icy road. Every turn she took, I followed. She didn't drive toward the mall or the main street shops. She didn't stop at the florist or the bakery. She kept going, past the town square, past the last rows of suburban houses, out into the outskirts where the trees grew thick and the familiar signs of life completely disappeared. My stomach sank. I realized I had never imagined following her this far. I didn't even know where this remote road led. The snow grew heavier, the world quieter. She slowed down at a turn, and I quickly killed my lights and kept my distance, creeping along the roadside. Her car moved carefully, tires crunching on frozen ground, before she turned down a narrow, unmarked lane I had never noticed before. No streetlights, no houses, just a path lined with heavy, frost-covered trees. I stopped the truck at the entrance and killed the engine. My breath fogged the windshield. The silence outside was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of her retreating car engine. For a few minutes, I sat still, fighting the overwhelming urge to turn back. Part of me prayed this was nothing, that she was just delivering food to a secluded, eccentric friend. But the larger, colder part of me knew better. You don't hide a truth for 10 years unless it's something that can destroy everything. I opened the door, stepped out, and felt the snow crunch beneath my heavy boots. The air stung my face, but I kept walking, following the almost invisible tracks and the faint red glow of her taillights disappearing deeper into the desolate woods. As I walked through that frozen silence, I felt the cold sink into my chest. Whatever waited ahead wasn't going to bring me comfort. It was going to bring an ending. The lane was narrow, the trees heavy with snow, forming a light swallowing tunnel. My tires crunched quietly over the ice as I followed her from a distance. She was maintaining a slow, deliberate pace. She never once checked her rearview mirror. She knew this road. Her movements were confident, familiar, like an essential, private ritual. I kept my distance, the suspense tightening my throat. After 10 minutes, the trees opened up to a wide clearing. Her car slowed again. I turned off my engine and then followed on foot, leaving the truck behind. The cold bit through my jacket as I stepped into the wind. My boots sank deep into the fresh snow. I saw her car parked ahead, half hidden behind a line of bare trees. She sat inside for a few minutes, unmoving, then slowly, the door opened. She stepped out, bundled in her gray coat, holding something small in her gloved hand, a tiny bouquet wrapped in paper. My breath caught. I crouched low behind a thick pine tree, my body trembling not from the cold, but from the dawning realization of what this might be. She looked around once, then started walking down a narrow trail that disappeared behind a small hill. I followed again, slower now, matching her pace, keeping hidden. The wind howled softly through the trees. Then, the wind dropped for a second, and I heard it. Faint, distant, the unmistakable sound of her sobbing, carried through the thick snow. I followed again, my lungs burning from the cold, knowing that I was walking toward the single most painful truth of my life. I followed the trail until the trees finally thinned out. Ahead of her, the white ground opened into a small, quiet clearing. I saw the black iron fence even before I saw what it surrounded. A cemetery. Old, isolated, half buried under a blanket of snow. The kind of forgotten place where true secrets are kept. My heart seized in my throat. Her steps were careful, almost rehearsed. She pushed the iron gate gently. It creaked loud enough to echo through the still air. She didn't flinch. I stayed behind the fence, hidden by a large, granite monument, my fingers numb against the cold stone. She walked past several graves until she stopped in front of one particular headstone. I couldn't read the name yet, but the way she instantly sank to her knees told me everything. Whoever rested there mattered more to her than I ever had. She brushed the snow away from the stone and took out the bouquet. They weren't just any flowers. They were old, white roses, the exact same kind we had used on our wedding day. I remembered them instantly. I thought she kept those roses pressed in a frame for us. I thought they were a symbol of our love. She placed the flowers on the grave and stayed there, unmoving, her head bowed. Her lips moved slowly, carefully, like she was speaking to someone who could still answer her. My body felt heavy, my mind paralyzed. Minutes passed, maybe more. The wind carried her voice faintly, not words, just sounds of raw sorrow breaking apart. Grief, guilt, devotion. Then she pulled something else from her small bag, a picture frame. I saw her hold it against the headstone and gently trace her fingers over the image within. She leaned forward until her forehead touched the name carved into the marble. It was a gesture of profound intimacy, the kind you share only with someone you still, desperately love. I watched as she finally stood up, dusted off her knees, and began to walk slowly back toward her car. When her engine started and the taillights disappeared, I finally moved. I walked into the cemetery through the same creaking gate, my legs heavy as stone. I stepped closer to the headstone she had just knelt beside, my hands trembling as I reached for the snow-covered stone. I crouched down and brushed the snow away slowly, revealing the name carved deep into the marble. The letters were familiar, too familiar. It was a man's name, one I had only heard once, years ago, spoken quietly and immediately dismissed. The date below the name stopped my heart completely. The day before our wedding. The same night she had disappeared all those years ago, claiming there was an emergency at her mother's house. I had believed her then, just like I believed every other lie she told me. The truth hit me so hard I almost lost my balance. She hadn't been visiting a friend. Every Christmas for 10 years, she came here, to him. I stared at the grave, and the pieces finally clicked. The preserved wedding flowers. The missing 3 hours. The quiet sadness in her eyes every December. The constant avoidance of Christmas planning. This wasn't guilt over something she did. This was love she couldn't bury. She had built an entire marriage beside me while her heart stayed frozen in this graveyard. I was married to a ghost, and I had never known it. I should have left right then, but I stayed. I heard a car door closing in the distance. She hadn't left yet. I crouched behind a stone angel near the path, my breath shallow. She walked back toward the grave, slower this time. She knelt again, placing her hand flat against the name. Her voice came out in a whisper, soft but clear enough to hear between the gusts of wind. She said she missed him. She said she was sorry. She said she'd always love him. She then pulled out a small glass box containing dried white rose petals the same from our wedding. She opened the box and placed the petals on the grave, letting the wind carry them away, one by one. Then she whispered the sentence that ended my world. She wished he could forgive her for marrying me. My heart sank. I wasn't her partner. I was her distraction from loss. She stood up, touched the grave one last time, and said goodbye, not the goodbye you say to the dead, but the kind you say to someone you still expect to meet again someday. When her car finally faded, I stood up. The wind had already covered her footprints. I turned away from the grave. The cold air burned my lungs, but I barely felt it. I had followed her for the truth, and I found it. But standing there, I realized something worse than betrayal. I was married to a ghost, and I had never known it. I drove home slowly. When I pulled into the driveway, her car was already there. She had beaten me home, her performance already underway. The front porch light was on. I saw her in the kitchen, calm, practiced, moving with such normality that it made my stomach twist. I finally went inside. The warmth hit me instantly, but the house smelled of cinnamon and lies sweet on the surface, bitter underneath. She turned around and smiled. "How was your morning, dear?" she asked. I said nothing. I hung my coat, sat in my chair, and stared at the flickering lights on the tree. Dinner was quiet. She talked about the neighbors, about nothing that mattered. When she reached across the table to pour me a drink, her hands were steady again. She had practiced this life for years. I looked at her for a long time. She smiled back, unaware that I had already seen the part of her she kept buried in the snow. I didn't mention the cemetery. I didn't ask about the man. I didn't need to. Because sometimes silence isn't forgiveness. It's the beginning of goodbye. When she reached across the table to pour me a drink, I finally asked her the question I had carried for 10 years. "Clara, where do you really go every Christmas?" Her body froze. The smile vanished. The mask was gone, and the silence broke her faster than anger ever could. She tried to explain about the accident, the promise, the guilt, but I stopped listening halfway through. I had heard enough. The years that followed were quiet, colder than any winter. Our marriage didn't end loudly. It just faded, like candlelight in an empty room. After that Christmas night, she never denied it again. Every Christmas morning for 3 hours, she disappeared, no longer lying about errands, just walking out without a word. I never tried to stop her. People can't let go of ghosts when they think those ghosts are the only things keeping them alive. This story is a reminder that some betrayals are silent, woven into routine. If you recognize this shadow in your own life, don't ignore it. Seek the truth. If this resonates with you, let us know in the comments below. Then one year, she didn't come back on time. I found her car parked in the same spot near the cemetery. The doctor said it was her heart. Peaceful, quick, the kind of death that comes to people who've carried too much sadness for too long. She asked for her grave to be placed next to his. I fulfilled that last request. Now, every Christmas, I visit them both. I bring the same white roses and place them on their graves, side by side. I stand there quietly, watching the snow fall, feeling the same cold she must have felt all those years ago. If you or someone you know is carrying a secret that's freezing them in place, reach out to Chroma Chronicles. We provide a space for quiet truths to be heard. I don't hate her anymore. The anger melted away long ago. What's left is acceptance. She spent her life haunted by love. I spent mine haunted by truth. Please share this video with anyone who needs to understand that not all love stories end with anger. Sometimes they end with a quiet revelation. I learned that ghosts don't rattle chains or appear in mirrors. They hide behind smiles, inside habits, beneath promises. They sit at the dinner table and sleep between two people who think they know each other. We upload new stories of hidden truths every week. Click the notification bell so you don't miss the next revelation from Chroma Chronicles. I light one candle now, every December. That candle is for all three of us. The man she couldn't forget, the woman I lost to a memory, and the fool who thought love alone could fill the distance between them. Thank you for watching this difficult Chroma Chronicle. Click on the video now, showing the hidden life for another story of secrets revealed.